What do people in China, the U.S., France, Italy, Portugal, what do all of these people have in common? Well, for those of you who are unfortunate enough to prefer Apple products, the thing that people from all of these countries have in common is that they have complained about, and many of them in many cases have filed suit against Apple for intentionally reducing the functionality of their products over the course of their lifespan. And you may be familiar with this. They kind of slow down, throttle the effectiveness of their phones when they get older, and they've got these cute reasons for doing it. But people who are on the receiving end of this say, we don't want this, we don't like this. In reality, this is something that's been around for a long time. It's a thing called planned obsolescence. The idea is a product is manufactured in such a way that it has an artificially limited lifespan. It doesn't last as long as it should. This is what Merle Haggard bemoaned when he gave these lines. He said, "I wish a Ford and a Chevy would still last 10 years like they should." And if that cultural reference is lost on you, you need to find a better culture. The idea behind planned obsolescence is we want to become discontent with what we have so that we'll be motivated to get the new thing. The Apple 15, iPhone, whatever the thing is new that's coming out, the goal is to increase our level of discontentment. There is a multi-billion-dollar advertising industry that is directly tuned to your heart and your mind. It knows what you think, what you believe, how you feel, what you're passionate about, what your interests are, what your hobbies are. It's attuned to your heart and your mind through your phone. I've read where in some settings, some Americans can see upwards of 4,000 advertisements every day. And if that's not enough, we have social media now that drives our discontentment and makes us dissatisfied with our figure, our family, and our finances. And I want to talk with you today about discontentment and how we can dethrone it. And here's the challenge with discontentment is here's what it does. It drives us deeper into debt, into dissatisfaction, and ultimately into distraction. If we adjust for inflation, some researchers have said that we spend somewhere between 2 to 10 times as much today on just normal goods like our homes, our cars, eating out, 2 to 10 times as much today than we did in the 1940s. One Huffington Post report says that the average American throws away some 65 pounds of clothes every year. Now, one book, Affluenza, reported that we have more shopping malls in America than we do high schools. And Forbes reports this, that the average American woman spends 190 hours per year shopping for clothing and shoes and window shopping. At the same time, that same group of women spend 95 hours per year shopping for groceries. I'm betting a man wrote that research article, don't you think? I don't think a woman wrote that. But the idea is that if we could just get more, we'll be happier, we'll be content. Now, anybody here, have you already started shopping for any early Black Friday deals? Like 3 honest people out there. The rest of you are like, I'm not going to confess. Wrong time to do that. As a social scientist, Robert C. Roberts from Baylor, he made this statement. He says, upward mobility, this belief that if we just get upwardly mobile, and isn't that what we all want? We don't want to plateau. We don't want to decline. Upward mobility often ends not in satisfaction and peace, but in exhaustion, disappointment, and in emptiness. So the question today is how do we dethrone discontentment? How do we grow in contentment? Because the truth is, the things that God has given us, from the people in our lives to the material possessions in our lives, We don't have to take this approach of like Buddhism that says we just renounce everything and walk away and dial down our desires, and that's the solution. The truth is these things that God has given us can be enjoyed as gifts from Him, but if we find ourselves in this dogged pursuit of more that leads us into unhealthy debt, leads us into stress, dissatisfaction, we ought to ask the question, how do we grow in our contentment? Well, the good news is this is something that's not lost on the writers of Scripture. One writer in particular, a man named Paul, who wrote much of the New Testament, was in a particular situation that would have given us great reason to be very, very discontent. He was, at the time of the writing that we're going to study today, under house arrest, some form of imprisonment. And so he could have focused on everything that was wrong in his life, but we find in the words of Paul a powerful statement, if you'll open up with me to Philippians chapter 4. We're going to begin looking at verses 10 through 12, and then we're going to dive in through the rest of this chapter and try to unearth this very powerful principle that helps us to grow in our contentment that we have. And so Philippians chapter 4, beginning in verse 10, Paul, he writes and he says, "But I rejoiced." And we're going to go back to that term, rejoiced. We're going to see it a lot here in the passage we're going to look at today. He says, "I rejoiced," and note the object of his rejoicing, "in the Lord." He's not rejoicing in his circumstances, his possessions, what he has. His joy is in the Lord. So he says, "I rejoiced in the Lord greatly, that now at last you have revived your concern for me. Indeed, these people, the Philippians," he says, "you were concerned before, but you lacked opportunity." You weren't able to show it. Verse 11, "Not that I speak from want, for I have," and here's a key word, "learned." What he's about to say is something that did not come natural to him. He said, this is something that I had to go to school to acquire a degree in this. He says, verse 11, "For I have learned to be content in whatever circumstances I am." In verse 12, "I know how to get along with humble means, and I also know how to live in prosperity. In any and every circumstance, I have again learned the secret of being filled and going hungry, both of having abundance and suffering need." The question that comes to us from verses 11 and 12 is, what did Paul learn? How did he get to this place where he could say, I'm content imprisoned? I'm content while I'm in a situation circumstantially that I would prefer not to be. What was the secret to his contentment? Now for us, we tend to think that contentment lies on the other side of the fulfillment of one of these desires. And these desires are really, they kind of drive our discontentment. The first desire that drives our discontentment, that we think if we had this, we could be more content. The first desire is this thing called bigger. If we had something that was bigger, then we could be more content. You don't have to raise your hands, but I just assume many of us have thought this before, that if I had a bigger bank account, then I could be more content. If I had a bigger 401k, if I had, kind of from my background, if I had a bigger acreage. I love the statement that was asked, like, how much land does a man need? Just the land next to his. Okay, it just never ends. John Rockefeller, at the time that he was asked this question, one of the richest men in the world, asked by journalists, how much money is enough money? To which he said, just a little bit more. So we think if we had a bigger something, okay, contentment is on the other side of that. In reality, that desire, it drives our discontentment. The second thing that drives our discontentment is not bigger, it's newer. It's newer. So if I had a newer home, a newer car, if I could go eat at the newer restaurant, if I had a newer pet, if I had a newer spouse, if I had something that was newer here, then things would be better. Other things would be, I would find contentment. So we find this desire for bigger, for newer drives our discontentment. And then we also have this thought that, well, I just want something that's better. Right? So if I had something that's better, a better wardrobe that's more fashionable, more in style, better shoes, maybe I need better gear. The reason my golf game is not good is because I need better golf clubs. I need a better kitchen and a better bathroom. And this discontentment is not driven always by the pursuit of more. There's a thing called the tiny house movement. If you're familiar with this, it's a thing, minimalism. And the idea there is that we're better if we could have less and kind of downsize. And so there's discontentment that kind of runs rampant. And ironically, while I was researching and studying for this sermon, I was in the middle of a time of also researching for the ultimate long-range hunting rifle. So, Lord, what's the message here for me? And so we think, all right, we find contentment on the other side. If I could get newer, if I could get bigger, if I could get better. But in reality, I don't think that's what Paul will suggest to us. So when we go back through and we look at his writing here and we're asking this question, okay, Paul, how did you learn this? What was the secret to your contentment? I want us to hop back up to Philippians 4, verse 4. And I want us to follow through it. I want you to study this with me and think through this with me. In Philippians 4, verse 4, we find this word, once again, that Paul uses consistently in Philippians. Verse 4, when he says, rejoice in the Lord always. Again, I will say, rejoice. And the object of his rejoicing is key here. He's not rejoicing in an outcome. He's not rejoicing in an answered prayer, though that would be permissible and good. He's rejoicing here in the Lord. He's grateful even while he is imprisoned. In verse 5, he says, let your gentle spirit be known to all. The Lord is near. He's mindful that Jesus is present with him even while he's in prison. In verse 6, he says, be anxious for nothing. He doesn't say be desiring of nothing. So he's not saying mutilate desire, kind of do away with desire, take the Buddhist approach to this, kind of have Zen. He's not saying that. He's just saying being anxious for nothing. But then he makes a profound statement, and there's a profound insight here when he says, but in everything, by prayer and supplication, look at this, with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. Now here's the profound insight. Paul says that while you are asking, make sure that your asking is accompanied by thanking. You see the chronology there, the sequence? For us, or for me, I'll say, here's the way I would typically think about this. First, I'll ask, and then when I receive, then I will thank. Can anybody relate to that? I thank you, Lord, for the answered prayer. Thank you, Lord, for the blessing. Thank you, Lord, for the outcome that you have given me. Thank you that the situation is better. But Paul says, no. Don't wait. Don't wait to start thanking God until after you've asked him for whatever you're asking for, you've received it. He says, make sure that your asking is accompanied here by thanking. We are to be thanking God in gratitude even while we are asking him. So verse 7, he goes on. He says, and the peace of God, and think of peace and contentment as kind of siblings. They operate together. The peace of God, which surpasses all comprehension, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. And then in verse 8, if you want a life verse, a verse to memorize, a verse to make your year better, verse 8, finally, brethren, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is of good repute, if there is any excellence and anything worthy of praise, dwell on these things. The idea is to meditate, to fill your mind with these good things. This, friends, is the heart of gratitude. And I believe we're starting to get closer to the secret of contentment that Paul is referencing in verses 11 and 12. And when we think about the the impact that gratitude has on our lives, gratitude, it's very difficult to be grateful and to be discontent at the same time. That what gratitude, thinking on the good things in our lives, what it tends to do is it goes over to discontentment. It takes power away from discontentment. It walks over to contentment and places power in the hands of contentment. Gratitude is something that robs discontentment of its power. And I think we see this further, reviewing verse 12, then moving into verse 13. We see this connection here between the secret of his contentment and Paul's gratitude for Christ and who he is. In verse 12, again, he says, I know how to get along with humble means. I also know how to live in prosperity. In any and every circumstance, I've learned the secret of being filled and going hungry, both of having abundance and suffering need. In verse 13, I think Paul puts a fine point to this question. What's the secret of your contentment? How is it that you have learned this? Verse 13. I can do all things through him who strengthens me. Paul, even while he was imprisoned, maintained gratitude, not because of an outcome, not because of a consequence, but because of Jesus. Because of who Jesus was. Now, Paul had confidence that Jesus would provide. If you go down to verse 19, there's proof of this when we find Paul saying to the Philippians and to us, my God will supply all your needs according to his riches and glory in Christ Jesus. So Paul had this confidence in Jesus and his provision, who he was, that I believe empowered him. This gratitude that empowered him to be content. To trust that Jesus had given him what he needs in that moment, in that time. And certainly he still had prayers, he still had requests, he had things that he wanted to see happen. But for Paul, his gratitude, and this is so key for us, this is so key for you where you live this week, his gratitude was not going to be limited by his unfulfilled desires. It's been said before, I talked about gratitude once, and Damon Hine, our bass guitarist, he mentioned to me afterwards, he says, Brian, and it's a quote that he goes by, he says, gratitude, it tends to take what we have and turn it into enough. And it's not that we don't have needs, it's not that we don't have prayers, as Paul did here in this passage, but gratitude, friends, it can be our best weapon against discontentment. And the central truth I want to give to you today is this, that contentment grows where gratitude flows. When we have gratitude that's flowing from our hearts, when we're Philippians 4:8 type people, when yes, there's 1,000,001 negative things that we can look at, yes, but we're Philippians 4:8 type people, and we're looking at the good. We're considering how we focus on those good things. It tends to grow our contentment. And so I want to share with you basically just 3 very practical ways that we can let gratitude flow in our lives. The first very practical way that we can do this, number 1, is to take inventory of our blessings. There's a song I grew up singing, little church settings, Count Your Blessings. Familiar with the song, Count Your Many Blessings, name them one by one, and it will surprise you what the Lord has done. There's a powerful truth in that, not just a hymn, but that's really what Paul is driving at in verse 8, I believe. And so if you come in today and you say, well, I would be grateful if I had something to be grateful about, here are a few things for which we can be grateful. If you make minimum wage is currently 32 times more than half of what the people in the world make. The average American, We're able to carry, because of our affluence, we're able to carry an average of 80,000 extra calories with us that we don't even really need, but we've got them there just in case there's some kind of zombie apocalypse or whatever. They're there. If you make $30,000, which you think about in our setting, how difficult that would be, your income is 10 times greater than the global median, and it's among the top 5% worldwide. If you're here and you're over 35 years of age, for much of human history, most people died before they were 30. If you have a job, stable income, live in a democratic country, you have a college degree, we're in the vast minority of people who have ever lived. I know a few unique things about kind of our context here within Douglas County. One of the conversation pieces I have with people oftentimes, they'll ask me and I'll ask them is, what travel plans do you have? And they go, oh yeah, we got travel plans here and there. And we just sort of assume like that's just sort of the air that we breathe here. It's just a natural thing. But if you think about it, if you ask that question in so many other different contexts and settings in the world, if you ask somebody like in a third world country, what are your travel plans? Oh, I'm going to travel to the next village and I'm going to try to exchange some goods that I have to feed my family for the day. I'm going to travel to the well to get enough water to supply for my family for a day. It's not that I've got travel plans. Our family has travel plans. There's no guilt involved in that. I'm just trying to illustrate how abnormal, worldly, like in general kind of world cultural, how abnormal it is for us to be blessed in an incredible way that we are. And I think a powerful confession that we can make based upon what Paul is saying here is this, that I will not let what I want keep me from being grateful for what I have. I will not let that one ultimate long-range mountain rifle keep me from being grateful for the multiple guns that do just fine, that I already own. And if we're not careful, we'll get into this kind of mode of thinking that says gratitude is really outcome-oriented more than attitude-oriented. And I believe the very thing Paul is teaching us here is that gratitude, no. It's more about our attitude than it is an outcome. And if your mindset today is this, that I'm waiting on God to provide an outcome, and then if and when that outcome comes, then I'll be grateful. Gosh, I'm waiting on God to provide an outcome in my health, in my job, in my marriage. And if He answers the prayers, then I'll move into thanking Him and being grateful to Him. And so, friends, when we do that, we become a victim of our circumstances. And what happens is you've just empowered your circumstances to determine the level of gratitude that you can show. And I would say to you, friends, let's don't do that. Let's don't, and it's our tendency, yes, but let's learn to be grateful even when we haven't seen the outcome that we want. And so take an inventory of your blessings, actually write down and be grateful for the things that God has already given you and say, I'm not going to let the things that I want keep me from being grateful for the things that God has already given me. A second practical way that we can let gratitude flow and see our contentment grow is something I teach a fairly regular basis called flip your focus. Flip your focus. Again, this is Philippians 4:8. When he says, whatever things are good, dwell on these things. There's a group of researchers years ago in the mid-90s from MIT, they did research on Olympic medalists. And I've noted some of the research that they've done before. It's really fascinating. But since that original research that was done, new researchers have come along, and there's a group from University of Minnesota, and they've taken this database of photographs from all the Olympic medalists going back to like 2000. And so they've got hundreds and hundreds of these photographs with these Olympic medalists, gold, silver, bronze. They're up there on the podium, and they've taken these photos and they've used a software that searches the facial features, the facial markers, to determine which of those medalists are the happiest. which of those had the most genuine, sincere joy, genuine, sincere smiles? And as you might imagine, the medalists that have the greatest joy are the gold. And don't we all want to be gold medalists in life? I mean, we want our kids to be gold medalists. We want our jobs, our business. I mean, we want everything to be gold medalists, right? But interesting, what they found in this research is they observed the people's faces. The people who were the second happiest, who had the second most genuine and sincere joy coming from them, were not the silver medalists. They were the bronze. And as they probed into and tried to figure out, okay, why is that? I mean, same thing that was found back in 1995. But the biggest reason for this, that it accounts for this unusual twist, is that the silver medalists, when they get up there and they're kind of having to paste that smile on, the reason is because they're thinking, I was so close. And they're comparing themselves upward. They're thinking, I was so close, I almost had it. Oh, I could have had gold. And then the bronze medalists, as they've observed that they've got greater joy on their faces, greater sincere happiness, and they've asked the question, well, how is it that bronze medalist is happier than a silver? It's because the bronze medalist is thinking, whew, I almost didn't make it. And the silver medalists, they compare up. The bronze medalists, they compare down. Right now, is there an area of your life that you're discontent with? Your health, your family, your kids, your grandkids, your parents, your grandparents. The question is this: are you comparing up or are you comparing down? Are you looking at the good that you have, or are you looking at the good that you don't have? We have in our home right now, and this is, for us, it's kind of an experiment right now. And we have a refrigerator that, it's a functional refrigerator, but it is like as ugly as it can be. And the bottom part that goes along the vent area, like time somebody touches it, it's like spring activated and it just pops off. And so it's always popping off, and it's annoying and frustrating. And then finally, several months ago, what our family thought was the death blow to this refrigerator was the door handle broke on the refrigerator. And so I can't confess this for my spouse, but I know inwardly she was thinking, yes, finally, the door handle broke off the refrigerator. And so obviously, what do? Newer, right? Bigger, better. And so, and now part of this is because of my flesh. I'm kind of tight about certain things, unless it's guns. And then it's like, I'm like, do we really need a new refrigerator? And so here's my attempt. I'm kind of going to spiritualize this for just a minute. Thinking, what an opportunity this is. Because our kids like the way the fridge door, it's like one of those stand beside whatever they call them things. You got the fridge over here and the freezer on this side. And so to open up the refrigerator, because like Dawson, he's too short, he has to open up the open up the freezer part with his hand here, and then reach his hand back around and open up the fridge part just to get into the fridge. And so can you imagine, the drama that would create? And so I thought, well, wouldn't this be great? A great opportunity for us to flip our focus. Now, I don't know how long this is going to last, like maybe another few months or so. I don't know how long I can hold out, but isn't it a great opportunity to say, look, we could look at the fridge and say, it's got this crummy thing on the bottom that's got dust and everything else, and it's got the door handle that's broken. I mean, we could look at it that way, or we've got a fridge, right? We've got this thing that cools our stuff, and people all throughout the world, throughout history, they never had this. We do. I'll update you and let you know if the project was successful or not. But it genuinely is. That's one example. You have refrigerators in your life right now That one door handle is broken. It's not perfect. It's not what you want it to be. Your health is not the way you want it to be, and the relationship is not exactly the way that you want it to be, and you wish it were different. Gosh, you're praying and you're asking God, you're presenting your request to Him. But the question is, in the middle of asking God for a change, are you able to do that with thanksgiving? And I believe if we are able to do that, contentment grows where gratitude flows. A third and final way that we can let gratitude flow in our lives is simply in this. It's by saying thank you. I coach one of our kids' basketball teams right now, and after the game, it will consistently be the case that one or two kids after a game, they'll come up and they'll say, Coach, thank you for coaching us today. And I immediately know what that parent has done is given that child an incredible blessing by teaching them the value of gratitude. It's what Jesus experienced when, if you remember, there was a time, Luke 17, he cleansed these 10 lepers. They all went away, but there was one leper who came back and rejoiced. He bowed down before Jesus. He was grateful. He expressed his gratitude. And we have in our lives everyday opportunities to let gratitude flow just by simply saying these two words. Thank you. Thank you. We know that whenever there's ingratitude, there's gratitude that's not expressed. It tends to create kind of a gap in the relationship. If you ever, like this Christmas, pay attention. If there is a child that receives a pair of socks or underwear from someone, the child's like, I'm not grateful for this. But you'll typically hear a parent that'll come in and say, now what do you say? What do you say? It's because they feel there's this gap in the relationship that's only filled by gratitude. I mean, just challenge you with this for a moment. There may be people in your life, there may be your spouse or your parents or your grandparents. There may be people where there's a gap right now because you've not expressed gratitude. It's been received, not that it's your intent, but it's been received as ingratitude. And there's a gap. And one of the best ways to remedy that, to close that gap, is to simply say, thank you. And so with that, I want to close today with this. Just a personal message for you as a church body. Aaron and I, we've been here with our family just a little over 5 years in September. Started on our 6th year. And I wanted to take a minute just so you know we are so incredibly grateful for you as a church family. I took stock this week trying to preach to myself at the things that God is doing here in the life of our church. And just a few weeks ago, I think we had some 13 babies in the nursery at one time. Can you imagine trying to care for 13 babies at one time? The heroes today are not the people on stage. They're the people back there changing diapers and teaching kids. They are. Our children's ministry, the investment that Carissa is making, the investment that Jess is making with our students, our youth, and we have averaged now some 15, 20 students, and we've just never seen that before as a church, those things happening. Young adults coming together for their Saturday night services. I think they've had some nights 20, 30 plus kids to kind of corral. It's incredible. With our young at heart, senior adults, we say here, we want a person who is 80 years old to feel just as loved and valued as an 8-year-old. We don't believe God puts a time limit on when a person's importance wanes, so neither should a church. And so we started this ministry, and we're seeing 50, 60 plus people coming and connecting through this ministry. Last Sunday, and just so you know before I say this, our primary goal is to be a healthy church, not a growing church. Now, we want to grow. It's bad, it's unhealthy if we don't grow. But our DNA, what we shoot for, is not to become a larger growing church, because if we do that, it leads to a lot of dysfunction and unhealth. So with that said, I'm so grateful. I think it was last Sunday, Sunday before, record numbers of people who are connecting online and connecting with us here in our services. Yesterday, And just the past few weeks, we've had a couple of folks who have passed away within the life of our church. We've grieved with them, we've mourned with them, but I've watched a group of women and some men involved with that come together and care for those families in incredibly powerful ways. Friends, you are being the church. You're being the body and the bride of Christ. And you need to know that and feel that. When our small groups ministry, we've had a number of people, Jerry and Melanie, who have headed that up, and Jeff McGuire is starting to come in, and we're going to continue to build and grow and see that ministry flourish. Yesterday, while a number of people were here ministering to this family, a number of you were out in front of King Soopers getting donations for Help and Hope. And I think like 7,000 plus tons of food or something that was recruited, along with our King's ministry leading that venture up. It's incredible, friends. We have within our women's ministry, if you want to find like a great place on a Monday morning or Monday evening, if you're a female and not just identifying as one, a biological female, we still believe in that here as well. Come here on Mondays and be part of this women's Bible study. It's phenomenal. They've got a Christmas brunch coming up here in a few weeks. And there are so many things, friends, that we have to be grateful for. And I just want you to know, we are so incredibly grateful. And it's been said, I'll close with this, that it's not happy people who are grateful. It's grateful people who are happy. Friends, we got lots of reasons. There's a lot of stuff, a lot of challenges, economically, health. A lot of challenges. We don't gloss over those, but my goodness, friends, we have so many things to be grateful for. We have so many things and reasons to rejoice in the Lord always. And so would you this week let your contentment grow as your gratitude flows. Father, thank you.